I ran away from home because home was not safe. And I ended up living at my grandmother's house. And I remember knocking at her door 11 o'clock one night, and she had 4 Yorkshire Terriers, and they were all just yapping. And I was like knocking at the door going, I can never go home. Please, can I come in? And from that point, I became the 5th honorary Yorkshire Terrier of that house. Having been given a second chance, there was almost just a mantra in my head, I must be a writer. And I think now it was because I really needed to express myself. I was born to it, I think. Obviously, I could work with a human who could do that, and ultimately they're better at it because, the people that work in theatre, they have a more instinctual feel. But as a writer, I think that it's been very helpful for me. I've enjoyed it strengthening bits of work, but then at the same time, I used it to write some stage directions for a play. And then when we actually got to read the play, the stage directions were so detailed, we ran out of time to finish the play.
It's variety.
Hello and good evening, and welcome to today's episode of the Variety Show podcast with me, Adam Sternberg. Now, today's guest is a playwright and an educator, and has very clear ideas about the relationship between creativity and AI, which of course is extraordinarily relevant today. So without any more ado, can I introduce Chris to our podcast. Hi, Chris Hogg.
Amazing. What a pleasure to be here.
Welcome. Now, this is the first time we've done a podcast where the guest is not sitting right next to me, but remotely. So it's nice to have you remotely, Chris.
Thank you. It looks like I'm in a tent. Let's acknowledge that. It's a sound booth I've tried to build in order to stop the sound of seagulls and sheep and horse racing, because I am in Brighton and that is the bane of our lives. You can record nothing without seagulls either stealing your chips or just making a noise and ruining what you're trying to do. So I've been trying to record an audiobook today. And so I have failed. It has gone wrong in so many different ways. I've learned so much. And this tent is not good enough.
Well, all I can say is at the moment, we're all very quiet. I can hear no seagulls, nor horse
racing.
Horse racing. Yes, but what's the noise of hooves? That's the word I'm searching for. Horse hooves. It's a bit of tongue twister, horse hooves. Yes. So
there's no
hoofing at all. So, Chris, tell me about where you started. Really, where did you grow up?
I grew up on the cliff tops in Bournemouth, and our house was known as the Crazy House. And our house had the police coming around every 5 minutes. Our house had a policeman at the end of our drive for about 6 months because of the Brinksmat bullion robbery.
Were you involved?
I was just a child, so I was not involved in the Brinksmat bullion robbery. However, my dad was very much like Arthur Daly, and he had a minder. He had a Dennis Waterman, who was a baggage handler at Heathrow, and Bill had a record for just things falling out of bags. What can I say? And one of which was, I remember one day waking up in the living room and there was $38,000 that had fallen out of a bag, which you shouldn't have been transporting through luggage anyway.
Quite right.
I think I might have to remove that person's name.
We can do that in editing.
Just Bill. Let's call him Bill.
Bill. Brinksmat, as far as I can remember, was slightly more than something falling off the end of a luggage rack. I think, from what I remember, it was quite a substantial.
It was. I think it was 26 million pounds of bullion.
So I don't think they ever found, did they? Or not much of it.
They found nothing.
They found nothing.
Not a single thing.
So they sort of thought that your father might lead them to it in some shape, form, or other. But
exactly.
But clearly, it didn't.
It didn't. But I learned a lot from living with semi-criminal stock.
What did you learn?
I learned that when caught shoplifting, you can, if you've stuffed it up your sleeve, you can hold your hands up in the air like this, and what you've stolen will fall down your sleeve into the back of your jacket, and consequently you might just get away, but never steal anything ever again because it was so stressful.
So I must say already your background seems slightly less typical than most of the guests I've had on this. So you grew up in Bournemouth, which is obviously a lovely seaside town. How was school for you there?
Well, I went to some very low-grade private schools. And then when the money ran out, obviously ended up sitting next to the secretary, licking stamps and putting them onto the envelopes until the fees were paid and I was allowed to go back into class. Eventually, I failed my 11 plus and went to another low-grade private school, but then got expelled.
Can I ask for what?
Sorry?
Can I ask for what you got expelled?
It was
a misunderstanding?
Accumulation of stupid things. I think that the final one was playing a game with a bottle of Tipex, throwing it 20, 30 meters, and it just slipped out my hand, hit the wall, and so just sprayed an entire beautiful red brick wall with white Tipex, which...
that sounds creative to me, potentially.
I like the cut of your jib, Adam.
So, having been expelled from that school, you found another one, did you?
Well, luckily, that also coincided with me running away from home. I ran away from home because home was not safe. And I ended up living at my grandmother's house. And I remember knocking at her door 11 o'clock one night and just her coming down in her Pond's cold face cream and all her hair in kind of, bobby pins, and she had 4 Yorkshire Terriers, and they were all just yapping, and I was like knocking at the door going, I can never go home, please can I come in? And from that point I became the 5th honorary Yorkshire Terrier of that house.
And where did she live?
She lived also in Bournemouth.
Oh, okay,
she had just moved there because her husband had died. She'd planned a great retirement in Worthing and it had all fallen apart, so she came to Bournemouth.
And she welcomed you in, I presume?
There was a bit of a gap in the air waiting for a human being to arrive. And it was great. It really was the arrival of an amazing woman at exactly the right time. And I think without her, goodness knows what would have happened. She was great.
And how old were you roughly at that point?
13.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were still in education then?
I was.
You were.
I arrived there the same week of the 1986 World Cup. And so I was there enjoying watching Gary Lineker score hat-tricks and bits and pieces like that, just to bring it full circle to what's going on now.
1986 World Cup, I do remember well. The first match against France, which we actually won. 3-1, I seem to remember. But I'll tell you later between you and me why I remember that so well, but not on
We'll use established back channels.
We'll use established back channels, exactly. So tell me at what point you started getting into art, drama, theatre, that type of thing.
I think that just because of my background, slightly chaotic in thinking, and so it was always useful to externalize thoughts. I could finish thoughts. I could see things on bits of paper. I could feel things that I was a bit too chaotic to feel inside. So I was always externalizing and then reading back in. And so I always knew as I was walking down the school corridor, having been given a second chance, there was almost just a mantra in my head, I must be a writer, I must be a writer. And I think now it was because I really needed to express myself. So I was born to it, I think.
So even at that age, you were sort of conscious of that you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, there was nothing else that ever came into my head, which is interesting now because now I feel like I'm done with it. I wanted to go and do something else, but I'm not sure what.
So when did you remember first sort of putting pen to paper creatively then?
Can I say I put pen to Etch-a-Sketch?
Now, come to think of it. Sorry, Etch-a-Sketch, that's when I nearly got expelled. I broke an Etch-a-Sketch over someone's head once. Gosh, that's come back. And that had funny grey powder inside that wasn't good.
You absolute delinquent, Adam.
I really just remember that. God, strange things come up at this. This is almost like some sort of confessional, actually, I've decided.
We've gone in a really strange
direction.
I'm into it. So I think I was about 5 years old and I was just drawing a tornado backwards and forwards on an Etch-a-Sketch, trying to teach myself to write. I was trying to get something out, some wind inside, some force, some energy, some drive. Dare we say libido? I don't mean like a sexy libido. I mean like a life force one.
That's good. A 5, that's probably the best type, I imagine. Life force one.
Yes,
probably. I get that. So you're playing with your Etch-a-Sketch, tornadoes, but then at some point, when did you sort of, put pen to paper, write something, a poem, a novel, 900-page novel, or whatever it might have been?
The first thing I think I did is I wrote a poem. I wrote a poem at the age of 16 and I admired it. I allowed myself to admire it. And I think it went like this. He went, I can't think words forward, slap ink on ink, pig slap paste and sauce, words twisted to work, shimmer up the escalator past the clerk, learning his boss's language to quirk, and shimmer to the office door, and shintry not wood, and the boss is up tricking in his tar car. Nice on leather, black and slinky shower moves through traffic, heavy consuming highway and stones in his spine. From the towel to the drawer, from the socks to the shirt, to the tie to the case, to the kiss on the face, his hair is falling out, indigestion from the speed, and coffee from the cup, and his everlasting meat sandwiches belch fumes, and neurotic flared nostril on a bulging brain vein, whiskey on a fag-stained breath by 12, heavy falling breath yellow dew. Then near the office, revolving his ill-fitting body through the glass door, pickled in processed air, mathematically cared for, plants with well-polished leaves, case slapped on desk, red power leather-like pork, pig and pig sauce tar in the car park. There is more, but
How on earth did you remember that then?
I think because I was really, really impressed with myself.
Well, I'm not surprised. I'm very impressed. I'd have given you, some prize. Definitely, straight away. Head boy, something.
Head naughty boy.
Head naughty boy. No, that's quite impressive.
Head naughty boy.
And
Thank
what
you.
I like there, if we're going to get really pretentious, Gerard Manley Hopkins wrote, "Read me with your ear and not with your eye." Sounds, the sound of poetry, as opposed to the meaning. Because I always think at schools, we all try hard to decode poetry. What does it mean? That's not what you should be doing with poetry. You should be feeling it. You should be listening to it, actually. I think.
We all get Bletchley Park.
Yeah.
We all turn into Bletchley Park.
Yes, that's exactly right. It's some code which needs decoding, and it's like a crossword. And jolly good if you can work out and know what your rhyme scheme is, and your rhythm, and your iambic pentameter, and all that.
Whilst your sexy Europeans are just whispering poetry into each other's ears.
Yes, which is much more effective. And who cares what it actually means? It's the feeling of it. It's the it's the sound. It's like music, isn't it? You don't sit there listening to Beethoven going, well, what does that mean? You just listen and enjoy.
Exactly. Like the people listening to this podcast. We're whispering into their ears. We're trying to make them feel a little bit weird.
Or, yes, I am already. That works. Maybe you should be a hypnotist. Maybe you are. Okay, so you wrote your poem and you got... What was the reaction from teachers to that poem?
They were surprised because I was just a naughty boy. And so it didn't quite compute, You never tell anybody what's going on at school when you're growing up. Not really.
No.
And so I was
you don't
just
even tell yourself, do you, on some level? It's sort of...
No, you're not even conscious, really.
Not really conscious. That's true.
No, exactly.
You're living in some, parallel universe. So they were surprised. And then you wrote more, and did they encourage you, or...?
I then went on to fail my A-levels and then redo them, and then got into a place called King's College, and then I ended up doing an English degree because I wanted to do a writer, not realizing that doing an English degree isn't really the route to being a writer. It's a route to talking a lot, reading a lot.
And being super pretentious and talking about Middlemarch and T.S. Eliot and other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. For hours.
Yes. Yeah,
exactly. But when did I really, I suppose, really commit to a creative life? I really committed to a creative life after I'd had a nervous breakdown. Much, much later in life. I think I only did a job that I really liked in life when I was 38, where I had been working in technology, and then I'd just spent far too long looking at a computer screen and just was hit by a wall of anxiety, and I just had to step away. And so I went and hid at Goldsmiths, which is an incredible London institution, which so many people seem to give birth to themselves in. It struggles to keep going. But it's just an incredible space. They've lost a lot of staff recently. That's what I'm saying.
So you went to King's, did your English degree. What did you do after you finished your English degree?
I went to work in a call centre, like all good. Well, my mother was just go and get a job. Yeah, she called me the reluctant manager because no matter, the more I disliked the job, the faster I rose within the echelons of the call centre until I was a supervisor for a little bit. And I talked to everybody in Britain, top and bottom. We were connecting people to their orange mobile phones from morning, noon and night. We did hundreds and hundreds of activations. And it was just so connecting. There's only a few characters in literature that get to go up and down through society. So, a murder mystery is often good to have a doctor in it because they can talk to anybody. A detective can talk to anybody. A policeman can talk to... So they're really good ways of understanding the kind of society we live in. And so working in a call centre, the good side of it is that you just get to understand the country that you're living in and what makes it tick.
And then have you used that ever as sort of creative inspiration?
Of the call center, not necessarily, but the sense that I can talk to anybody and want to talk to everybody is something that's really important. I've always lived on council estates, and I live on one now. And you see loads of flags, loads of England flags and loads of kind of different types of flags. And what you realize when you live here is like people want their world to mean something, and that flag means something to them. And it's just like, I exist, this is my world, and these are the things that that I don't think they're necessarily actively trying to oppress. I think it's just like they just want, if you live on the estates that I've lived on, people have tough lives. And so there's tragedies all around. People here don't like to talk about it really, but there's tough lives.
Well, no, they're very tough lives. And I'm sure part of the reason, or a large reason, of the dissatisfaction of society is because of the toughness of their lives and the feeling that they're not part of the society we live in, that they have been neglected, that there must be a solution elsewhere which takes their needs into consideration. So I think I was listening, what was I reading? There's a German politician who has said that what most people want to be is zugehört, which German means to be listened to. To be listened to. That's an easy word to say, and we will talk about the importance of listening. And I have trouble with this on this podcast because as of now I'm talking rather than listening. But true listening is hard.
True listening, you're in danger of changing.
Yes, and also you're faced with difficult issues.
Yeah, exactly. Really tough choices, I do think that hopefully that the country is on a journey of reinventing itself. I think that's the task at hand.
Well, I think that's a positive way of looking at things, and hopefully that is true not just of this country, but maybe the Western world in general is a process of rebirth. Otherwise, it's a process of destruction. Maybe one is this, maybe one and the same. Possibly, I don't know.
I'm not wise enough to know. We can only just wait and see.
So, okay, call center for how many years?
Too many years. Yeah. I then ended up working I then ended up living in Madrid, teaching English as a foreign language.
Okay, so that sounds more...
And then I ended up going to be a secondary school teacher in Sri Lanka for a little while as well. I've always loved teaching. Why? I think because I really like presence. It's like a conversation with 100 people in a room. I lecture now and I just enjoy the experience. And this has led to a lot of my thinking about the differences between human creativity and AI creativity, in the sense that I think that presence, what you have and I have, this coexistence, this being here on this earth at this moment in time, in the same place at the same time, that's the feeling that technology can never replicate. It's the magic that technology will ever get near to, be it the warmth in your duvet when you go back to it after 10 minutes going, oh, wow, it's still warm. Or, or perhaps somebody who's been so profoundly unwell or disabled that they've never been able to really contribute to the society in the way that perhaps society expects. Yet when that person dies, there's a loss to us all. This idea of co-presence, for me, it has become important.
That is what gives humanity its magic moments, isn't it? It's whether it's a presence on a one-to-one basis when you go to the pub with a friend, or on a mass basis when you go to a football match, or the church, or whatever it may be. It's some sort of communion, isn't it, on some level?
You're 100% right. Yeah, I think it's a very nourishing feeling.
Coming back to art, I suppose that's also what art provides on some level. So art, whether you're drawing a picture, writing a poem, or putting on a play, is for others other than yourself. Yeah. Well, not always, but often it is for others to experience.
There's a Japanese expression, I can't remember what it is, but just think of yourself little and think of the world a lot, as in the correct balance of thinking. I'm a terrible overthinker, so when I appreciate that one.
Well, unfortunately, I'm the opposite. I'm a bit of an underthinker. Winging is one of my favourite words, as in winging it.
How do you feel about the term bish bosh?
Bish bosh, yes, I like that. Bish bosh is bish bosh.
Bish bosh done, just done.
That's a bit like winging it. That is winging it. Bish, yes, exactly. I'm an expert bish bosher. So while we're on English, sort of English literature, who did you find inspiring, even in those traditional sort of?
All my favourite writers begin with the name Douglas. So Douglas Adams, obviously.
Yeah.
Douglas Copeland, and I also like a media theorist called Douglas Rushkoff. And I think between those three, they have a small antidote to the present ennui around technology. I think that the current debates about AI are so lacking in humour. And the universe is a funny place.
And that's what Douglas Adams always knew, didn't he? That the world is a strange and funny place.
Yeah, he was the missing link between Doctor Who and Monty Python, as in he wrote for both.
Interesting.
And so he has that that's the crucible of his brilliance, I think.
So you did your teaching. What happened after Sri Lanka?
After Sri Lanka, I went to work in technology. It was a case of coming back, being 25, pretty clueless, somebody saying they need people over here that can speak French. And my mum was French, so I could speak French. And so I just knocked up, had a 15-minute interview, and then was working for one of those Palo Alto technology companies. And the first day I arrived, they gave me 4,000 shares. And I sat next to someone and I was like, well, what are shares? Goes, well, if you stay 4 years and they can retain their value, that'll be about £500,000 to you. And I just fell about. I just was like, what is this world? It's crazy. The next day was the bust of the whole of the .com bust began.
So your shares then became slightly worth, slightly less.
They became worth nothing very soon after that. It was hilarious.
Well, there's the delights of capitalism in one easy lesson, isn't it, I suppose?
So within 24 hours.
So were you working in Palo Alto in the States?
No, I wasn't. I was working in London for a Palo Alto-based company. So I ended up, there are so many good jobs out in this world, and I ended up being essentially an internet plumber, being able to understand the data and being able to plumb things in so that you could work out, how many times people had seen an online ad, and then did they buy something 2 months later on? It was all of that stuff that eventually metastasized into Cambridge Analytica. It was
so the early days of data mining and stuff, I suppose.
Really, really early days. And the only things that the people really cared about was trying to get people to buy something using their credit card online, because nobody trusted the medium at all.
But there does seem to be a contradiction then in you to enjoy teaching, to go to Sri Lanka feeling, satisfaction and that presence thing you mentioned, but then to go and work for a tech company, mentally, psychologically, how does that work?
I think I find it quite easy to betray my values.
Is it money?
No, I wasn't even earning that much money. I'll give you an example, a more prescient example of how all of this comes together. Back in November last year, I had made the decision that I wanted to go to Goa for Christmas. And so I spoke to my sister, who runs a small agency for actors. And I said, look, is there any way that bear in mind, I'm an associate professor at university now. Is there any way that you can find me some extra money? And to which she goes, actually, I was about to turn this down, but I think if you're up for it, we can do it. And so she put me up for a job to be a Santa Claus at the Winter Wonderland in Norwich. And so for £500 a day.
That's good. That's very good.
Exactly. I'm a bit overweight, right? And, put a bit of white in my hair.
Yeah, you go from Kenneth Branagh to Father Christmas. There we go.
To Father Christmas. And so I would finish lecturing on the Friday and then drive 3.5 hours to the Norwich Showground, where there was a winter wonderland run by a large gypsy family. It's obviously a huge well-to-do. There's huge rides and things like that. But obviously, they want you to work very hard. And I think on my first shift, I had a 15-minute break in 7 hours of being Santa Claus. We had a very, very strict amount of time. So we had to get a family in. I had 2 elf assistants, one outside in the rain, one in the grotto. And I can send you pictures of this should you be interested. And we had 4 minutes to get in and take the picture and then hoof it out. But obviously, you can't just get whole families into a grotto in 4 minutes, take a picture and then hoof them out. And you have to give them a present. So we were at 7 minutes. And so that meant that people were waiting up to an hour to see Father Christmas in the cold and the rain. And it just started spiraling in terms of the morale of everybody involved in the whole Father Christmas adventure. None of them knew how much I was getting paid, which would have
made them even less happy.
they would have just killed me. Anyway, so I then used that money to go to India to spend time in Goa over Christmas for a month. So I just think I'm up for most things, and I don't take myself so seriously as perhaps society asks you to.
And I think as a creator, that's important, isn't it? To be interested in doing your own stuff, to have as many experiences as possible, to get outside your comfort zone and to experience stuff that you otherwise might not have done, which leads to conversations and leads to stories that you might never have heard before. I mean, going to Goa, going to Sri Lanka, going when you're councils, these are places with stories, all places with stories.
Yeah. So just to carry on the Father Christmas, when I was in Sri Lanka, the idea came to me that perhaps I could write a new Father Christmas classic, not a Father Christmas, but a Christmas story, a la Christmas Carol. And at the same time, I was reading about Icelandic folklore, and Icelandic folklore has this idea that before Christmas, there are these things called the Yule lads. And they are naughty boys who are trying to escape their mother, who's called Grilla, who wants them to continue to eat and terrorize children, but they don't want to do that anymore. So these creatures in my fantastic story take over a university lecturer, and then that university lecturer starts misbehaving and losing the social thread and just declining through society very, very fast until he's fired for shoplifting from the student union shop, and he's escorted off. And then because the Yule lads think they've gone too far, they get him a job as a Santa Claus. Now, that story has been presented to Hat Trick, which has then put it into the Radio 4 commissioning round, hopefully for Christmas 2027.
So that story is an amalgamation of a lot of your different experiences then?
Yeah, and so I'm pleased that I ended up working at a winter wonderland. You get to learn so many things about British people. So many people walk in.
I think that's true. Maybe the Santa is the same as a call centre person. Everyone takes their children. I mean, okay, the upper classes might take their children to Harrods, I suppose, or somewhere, and other places. Ascot, the Ascot Santa. But yes, everyone goes to Santa, and Santas get to hear and see different people, don't they? And the joy of, children, Christmas.
I can tell you the secrets from the inside, right? These are exclusive things I'm going to tell you now.
Okay,
so the youngest child that was brought in to the grotto was 13 days old. The oldest was 38 and was brought in by his 3 aunties, and he had a huge wheelchair and a Minecraft sword and was profoundly disabled. What's interesting is that you start looking at it from the little children's perspective. So they have to queue up to see a strange man who they don't really know. And they have to go into a grotto or a cave. And then they have to step over the threshold, trusting that there's going to be someone, and that person's going to ask them a question, i.e., what would you like for Christmas? And then something good will happen. And so if you're looking at it from a mythological perspective, this is very much like Yoda's cave. Like, you're having to go in, you're going through a kind of ordeal. And the infants, they're fine. The 13-month-olds, they've got a bit of stranger anxiety. The 2-year-olds are just hiding behind their parents' legs. The 3-year-olds, they're kind of peeking around. The 4-year-olds have got a bit of confidence. The 5-year-olds are quite chipper. The 6-year-olds, they're still into Father Christmas, but the 7-year-olds, they're like, is that real? ChatGPT says you're not real.
What does ChatGPT know? Yes, fascinating.
It doesn't know anything.
It doesn't know. Well, yes. What did I ask it? Some question. Can I make myself redundant? It says yes, which I thought was...
You're letting me ramble on.
No, you're very good at rambling on. No, I've been told off before by talking too much. So this time I've decided...
I want to ask you questions.
Go on then. I'm up for it.
Who's your tailor? He's very good.
Tailor. I know this is a reduced price jacket found on a sale, actually. One of my skills. So hold on, let's talk then about AI then, which obviously is the sort of flavour or the not flavour of the month. In a nutshell, for you, what is the relationship between AI and creativity? People say AI can write music, AI can write poems, AI can write novels.
My view on this was born a couple of years ago when I had 4 students walk out of a class where I was teaching AI. My view had been, I was just talking to them going, well, this intelligence, this alien intelligence has landed on Earth and it's disguised itself as a fun fair ride, and it's encouraging you to have a go for free. And so it's important for you to try and find the limits of how comfortable you feel co-creating, co-making with this entity. But 4 of them were just like, no, packing our bags, we're going, we don't want to learn about this. They were just on the beginning of their own creative journey. They were designers and digital designers, and they were like,
they left because they thought AI was just nonsense, or potentially taking their work away, or
exactly demoralized that their creativity was in fact going to be the loss.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Which is a view, isn't it? It is a view.
It's within the student, I'm going to say echo chamber, it's the view. But having been to India recently, they do not hold young people do not hold the same view. It's a very, I think, quite a British specific feeling about perhaps where we are, perhaps where young people are in this nation, and how respected they are. Oh, here's another thing that's just, going to screw up our chances of getting a house or a job or whatever. So I went on a quest to speak to as many clever people as possible to try and find out what they would have said, because I didn't know what to say to the students. So I was like, okay, well, who's Britain's best playwright? Right, Simon Stevens. Simon Stevens, please, what would you have said to these students? Or Eli Islami, who's one of the people at Google DeepMind, what would you have said to these students? I got various answers. So I think that there are very distinct differences between human creativity and AI creativity, and I tried to define them. And so the number one, I think, is obviously this sense of presence. This, the knowledge from an AI doesn't have bruised knowledge. It's just like an octopus that changes its skin. It shimmers, it changes. That's the level of knowledge. The other thing is that AI isn't very good at framing problems. So one of the first creative acts that humans do when they decide that they want to make something is decide the frame, is to place the frame of the question. What are the parameters of the thing that I'm trying to make and create? Whereas AI doesn't necessarily come up with that kind of stuff on its own. It can't. It's always being told in order to kind of make the frame to frame something.
By frame, do you mean the basic concept?
The basic concept, like
the subject of the novel or the play, or
exactly.
So it can't shoot. That's right. So if you said, just write any poem, I wonder what it comes up with. It needs to be directed, I suppose.
Yeah. Also, the knowledge that comes out of an AI is a corpus of knowledge. It's a body of knowledge. It's millions of people's knowledge, whereas the knowledge that comes out of you or I comes through the filter of one person.
Although I would sort of disagree, because we ourselves are products of lots of people's knowledge as well, aren't we? We're all inspired. We all take inspiration from things we've heard, even if it's subconsciously.
I take that. I haven't thought about that before. I agree with you.
When we write, so in a way, our brains are our own AI, in a way. We take, so it's not artificial, and it might not even be intelligence, but it's sort of, I don't know, throughout your life, you read so much and you don't remember most of it, but at some point you write something down and you think, gosh, where did that come from? And it might well have come from something you read yonks ago.
I love that. Only a truly creative person would come up with that insight, I think, because creativity is a bit of a voodoo, strange witchcraft. Like, where does it come from? It can feel quite uncanny, when something feels like it's just there, like a power source ready to use and plug in. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, you're like, what is going on here?
No, that's true. But I always think you have to just be almost constantly aware there's inspirational things going on around you all the time. Overhearing conversations, I don't know if that's morally not correct, but you can hear the most bizarre conversations, just overhearing conversations, which are inspirational. I heard at the bus stop, there's this very drunk woman who kept on talking about how she was a Reiki healer, but was just completely pissed. Talking to this guy who was not at all interested in the fact that it was just completely surreal. And then in your head, you build a sort of scenario about how she got to this point.
Yes.
But the world's full of things like that, I think. If you're open to them.
I think you're absolutely right. When you suddenly see a friend who you haven't seen in 10 years, and you're like, and maybe you were thinking about them, and then suddenly they appear.
Yeah.
I think part of the reason that happens is because maybe you are, as you said, open to something. You're looking, your eyes are up, they're not down. They are looking around you, and suddenly you start seeing the connections in a way, which is perhaps one of the tragedies of our phones, is that we miss out on so many connections. I think that technology, after having worked in it for 20 years, to quote a wonderful thinker called Victoria Heffernan, the nature of technology is magic and loss. So it creates a piece of magic, but then takes something away at the same time.
Well, the two almost going hand in hand in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think this brings me to another point that I've left with after a couple of years, which is that the future just doesn't march along. The future creates a shadow, and the future creates a shadow of its opposite. I don't mean to get all kind of philosophical, but it's just it's a dialectical relationship. So what we'd have all noticed this year is that as AI moves forward, suddenly people are really back into crafts again. And
absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. I think, it's dialectics. Something creates the opposite. It has to, because you need that balance.
They travel together into the future.
And that's why I'm really hopeful at the moment of things like live events, like theatre, like football matches, even possibly things like the attendance at church, for example. I just think all those things people need more of because of what's going on in the opposite direction. I'm sure that's the case.
Am I allowed to say, is this the birth of the presence economy?
But I think, yes, you are. And I think it could be. I mean, again, maybe we're wishful thinking, but I think you're right. This year has sort of shown that. I think whatever AI can do, I don't think it can inherently change the essence of a human. And the essence of a human is someone who needs to communicate and to commute with other people. That doesn't change.
You might even say that a human is not a human without another human. A monkey is not a monkey without another monkey. It's just in isolation. But we're built on that need to co-regulate with each other. I know. Certainly, I've had a very lonely year. And so maybe all of these things I'm saying about presence are really related to how I'm feeling, which is more isolated than I felt in a long time. And so my psyche is reaching out for ideas about presence and connection. But I hope that's a direction of travel for me.
So have you got any solutions for yourself then to feel less isolated?
For me, I just have to I have to make an effort to connect to people on a daily basis. Not that I love people, adore them, but to treat it like a vitamin that I need. I think that as a society, we get lonelier. And I think I'm just going to relate it back to myself. Oh, hang on, I can hear a milk truck.
No, let's have that. No, don't. I like that. Ice creams, you see, that's another great unifying factor, I believe. AI cannot create ice creams. We, people, have to go out to the man who's actually the same man, roughly, as that I had 50 years ago. Same concept, isn't it? That hasn't changed. Q, get your ice cream, eat it.
Excuse me, I'm just going to go and get an ice cream. No, not really. As I said, this sound booth is not very good.
No, I thought actually that was quite lovely. Are you saying, though, that are you lazy in terms of, I mean, I am as well to say, you have to force yourself?
Yeah, I think as a middle-aged man, it's very easy to let your friends group fall away. And your work friends become your friends. And then, as we now all work from home, it becomes more isolating. And I feel very much like, I'm going to tell you another lovely fact, which is about the disease of scurvy. I know I jump about. I'm sorry about this. But scurvy is an illness which is created by a lack of vitamin C. It was the bane of seamen for 200 years. But yet the irony being is they were sailing past tropical fruits right, left and center, but hadn't made no connection that scurvy, that it would cure scurvy. It was the vitamin C.
Yeah.
Now, I think if people are not connected, not touched, then it kind of has an emotional scurvy. And one of the symptoms of scurvy, the real scurvy, is that your old wounds begin to unbind. So you're a pirate and you've eaten no fresh fruit, vegetables for weeks. Suddenly your ankle that you broke when you were 12 breaks again. It's the point of weaknesses that begin to unbind. And I think that therein is one of the sad things about loneliness, is this scurvy that kind of just gets you. Does that make sense?
I do. And so for me, I think that's another role that the art can play on some level, is bringing people together, whether it be, I don't know, community groups, writing stuff together, watching stuff together, however it might be, or not just play anything. Book clubs, for example, I always think are an interesting, it's people reading books, but it's really just sort of an excuse to get together. I mean, a choir, that's another, we sing, obviously, not for you now, but it's another way of bringing people together over a shared interest. And I think that is very important.
Yeah, and it's something that's bigger than themselves.
And you have to work together as a team and,
I mean, that's the knowledge, again, back to AI, that AI can't create that collaborative friction that creates the knowledge. And I'm sure you've spoken to many people over the last year or two. And, friction, mistakes, errors, bruises, that kind of knowledge is born of collaboration.
But you're right. And I've always said humanity lies not in perfection, but in the errors. It lies in the faults, in the mistakes. And in fact, I always think going to live theatre works because at any time it can either go horribly wrong or it just it's never perfect. It can't be perfect because in fact there's no such thing as perfection. We enjoy it because of its imperfection. Otherwise it'd be really boring. And that's why a CD is really dull because it's just perfect.
You're absolutely right. I couldn't have put it any better than you just have, as in the kind of bruised knowledge that we were talking about before. I think that we have maybe we could say that we have a stupidity shield, as in like if the world has a kind of a magnetosphere that protects it from like the rays from the sun, potentially our own daftness, stupidity, regret, pain, failed decisions protects us from being too efficient. And therein lies one of the natures of AI is that it's too clever, too efficient, too overwhelming, gives you too many answers too quickly. It's too much.
And there we have, again, two things going in the opposite direction because you've got computer power ever increasing, going faster, getting more perfect, sums of infinite proportion being solved infinitely quickly. And then on the other hand, that's not really what we're about. It's about the errors. So you've got one hand, you've got things trying to be as perfect as possible. And then you've got the human on the other side trying not to be as perfect as possible. That's why I think winging it is a good human thing to do. I don't think AI wings it. Maybe I should ask AI if it could wing it. What's that other word you used? What's that thing you just said?
A bruised knowledge.
Bruised knowledge, yes.
The knowledge that comes from physical
pain.
Making physical mistakes.
I presume that you would say that AI does have some use within the creative sphere.
Can I go on a little tangent?
Of course.
Would that be all right?
Or even a cotangent.
Can we go on a cotangent?
That's a mathematical joke, which wasn't that funny. But anyway.
Was that a dad joke?
It was more like a grandfather joke, actually, which is one step worse than a dad joke. Actually, dad jokes are my speciality. I'm thinking of forming a whole act around dad jokes, but never mind. Yes, you may. Tangentalize away.
So obviously the students walk out of this class, I go on a quest. And one of the theories that I come across is by Marshall McLuhan, who obviously great 60s thinker, came up with the ideas of the global village, talked about the internet and hot media and all of the and the medium is the message. So, the technology has an inherent impact on the stories that are told within it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, he's got some little known essays from the 1980s that he wrote with his son's called Eric. And there's one called the Media Tetrad, which is a really beautiful little theory. And essentially it says that whenever there's going to be a new foundational change in technology, it's going to have 4 impacts on your life. And so number 1, it's going to enhance something that you do. Our ability to iterate, make pictures, come up with infographics, PowerPoints. We've been enhanced. It's going to cancel something that you do. Oh, I don't need to ring my friend who's a designer because I've just done it. Just done it at my desk. Then a really cool one is that it will bring something back from the ancient past, something that we used to do, that we used to take for granted, that we've forgotten that we used to do. An example might be television. So we sit round a television watching as a family like we might have done a fire, hundreds of years ago in a cave. And finally, it's going to become so successful that it's going to have negative flip-out consequences that are really difficult to predict. Now, the thing that makes AI feel so overwhelming at the moment is that all of these things happen at exactly the same time. You're being enhanced, you're being cancelled, weird shit's coming back from the past, and and there are negative consequences that are hard to predict. The thing that I think it really brings back from the ancient past is actually a power of words. You've seen people shouting at their computers. They don't keyboard anymore. They're just telling their computer. They're vibe coding with a microphone. And so this sense that our voice has power to have an impact in the world, I think is something that is brought back. Like we're in an age of kind of conjuring in a way. And I'm being very poetic and woolly about this.
No, but that's good. Yeah, you are. You're allowed to be poetic.
Anyway, so those things fall together. So you asked me the question, it must have enhanced loads of stuff. Absolutely. And I have to say, on a personal level, I've got closer to AI over the last year, and it's even started calling me by my first name, which I find very odd. I've got over. It's like, hey, Chris, listen, that conversation we had 3 weeks ago, do you remember that? And I'm like, yeah, I remember that. Well, you said this. So it's just like, I'm really on board. And I've got over that feeling of sickness where I know that I've overshared with an AI and I don't know what's happening to the data. I've kind of, there's a bit of self-leakage going on with this technology. And I've just gone all in. I don't know how it happened, but I've given up worrying about what's happening to the conversations that I'm having with it. I try and work with it emotionally.
So, but would you ever use it to help you hone something you've written?
Yes, I have done that. I have absolutely done that. But I've always made sure that that I make human marks first. So I write everything by hand with a fountain pen.
Wow.
And then I type that into something, and then maybe on a dramaturgical level. So a dramaturgy is the process of asking a text 1,000 questions to see how well it communicates. So I find AI to be a brilliant dramaturg. So it's like, okay, you're on page 13. We've had this scene. What is the audience going to understand from this scene? And it breaks it down beat by beat by beat. And that's very useful. Very, very useful. Obviously, I could work with a human who could do that. And ultimately, they're better at it because, the people that work in theatre, they have a more instinctual feel. But as a writer, I think that it's been very helpful for me. I've enjoyed it strengthening bits of work. But then at the same time, I used it to write some stage directions for a play. And then when we actually got to read the play, the stage directions were so detailed, we ran out of time to finish the play. So, Yeah.
Yes, I think you mustn't be fooled into thinking that it's a fountain of wisdom, is it? It's like, it just gives you, it's like another friend who's an expert in something. He gives you some tips, which you can then choose to listen to or not to, depending on your... What I think it does, it makes you think. So I wrote a musical and I typed in the script and asked it for feedback, what was strengths and weaknesses? And it gave me a whole list of strengths and a whole list of weaknesses, which you look at and you think to yourself, yeah, that might be right, or well, I think you're wrong. But, it raises questions, which I think that is quite useful.
Can I ask you about your musical?
Yes, you may.
What was it called?
It's called Variety, funnily enough. It was about,
Really?
loads of variety acts, actually, but within the context of a narrative.
So obviously, I find that brilliantly fascinating because I think variety and vaudeville came at a really specific time in culture. So people were being traumatized by their culture. They were coming in from the fields and they were arriving in New York City and seeing airplanes and cars and jazz and all kinds of different fragmentary experiences. And I think that entertainment not only had to reflect that, as in so entertainment became episodic, like a dog act followed by a juggler followed by somebody else. And I feel that it was then repackaged to make people feel all right again. So it's like, yeah, life's crazy. Life has got all of this fragmentary, it's traumatizing, it's put everything in fragments, but let's bring it all back together and create it a joyous experience.
But no, you're right. But for me, what was mainly interesting, and indeed the reason I did this podcast, was to understand the backstories behind these people. You see the magician, you see the singer, you see the drag actor, whatever it may be. You see their persona on stage, you see the finished product. But why are they doing it at all? Why didn't they end up with a sensible... It's the questions I've asked you already. I think it's interesting to know and understand. These are people, after all. They're not some weird... They're just normal people who just happen to have a rather unusual way of earning a living, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, if you're asking myself that question, I think, just wanting somebody to say, "Oh, what a good boy you are. Well done." It's just, I just want my mum to say, "Oh, what a good boy. Oh, well done."
But I think a lot of us want that, don't we? We want a pat on the shoulder, this sort of recognition. And, for a lot of the performers I've interviewed, they've had big choices to make. They could have just had sensible jobs, a number of them in mainstream accountancy firms or lawyer, whatever they might have been, but they decided not to do that, to have a job which is really unpredictable, which is really uncertain, which is really hard to pay the mortgage. Not everyone would do that, even if they had the talent. So it's these choices. Life's all about choices, and what choices you make, it's what defines you. We can all say a lot. We can all talk about our beliefs, this or that, but what we decide to do, that's us. It's why you decided to end up being a lecturer or knowing about AI or not being in the call center. These are choices you made.
Yeah. I 100% agree with you. Can I ask you, are you going to write any more musicals?
My interest sort of at the moment is trying to broaden the appeal of art. So something else I've learned from these podcasts is that so much of all genres is still limited to a very small group of people, both in terms of the people doing it and the people watching it. So unless you have money or got supportive parents, it's very difficult to become a classical performer, an actor, anything, because often you need to be earning a living. You need to be maybe even supporting your parents. Maybe you don't have a one-parent family. So the arts become very limited. And if we think the arts are important for all our mental health, then we need to be finding ways that is delivered to a much wider group of people. I'm fine. I'm white and middle class and fortunate enough to go to a private school. But the majority of people aren't that. So how do you bring stuff to people?
Yeah. I mean, on this estate, I think people do come in and they want to make people here enjoy the arts more. But there's a problem, which is they want to get out of a poverty trap more than they want to get out of being art.
No, of course, absolutely.
Oh, no, I wasn't contradicting. Yeah,
no, that isn't a contradiction, but you're exactly right. But that's without getting too political. That's when people go on about all the sorts of rights that need to be equal and greenhouse effects and ecology, and it's all very well and good. But for a lot of people, these are all secondary to just earning a living, to surviving. So we have to be aware that for a lot of people, survival is everything, and everything else is just icing on the cake that they're not interested in.
On this estate, a lot of people make music in their bedrooms and they see music as the primary way out, or drum and bass, or making a dance music track, and it's very achievable. And I'm really hopeful that that AI will allow people to have that kind of assistant, maybe
to democratize arts in some way, to make it more available to more people.
Yeah. I mean, there's a guy called Reg who came and painted my living room, and he's been in prison for 11 years, or was in prison for 11 years, and he can't read or write. But, when we had a chat about AI and the fact that he could speak to an assistant and it would give him proper answers, that was a moment for him. That was a real moment. It's like, wow, I don't think we've seen that kind of trickle down yet, or nobody's really looking at it yet, but I think that is going to do some good.
I mean, that's quite interesting, because you just think of AI, we all individually think of AI, how it affects us, ourselves, as opposed to, yes, the effects it can have on parts of the society of which we're not really in touch with. And yes, you're right. I mean, that could be very interesting, how AI could help people have more knowledge about more things and democratize things, I think. Yeah. Anyway, Chris, time has rushed on. This has been amazing. I've really, really enjoyed this. Really enjoyed it.
I've really enjoyed this conversation as well.
I mean, we should have had another 2 hours probably, but we don't. It'd be nice to meet up with you at some point and discuss further over a coffee or 3 in Brighton. Or an ice cream. We can have an ice cream, actually. That'd be nice, an ice cream.
Yeah.
And fish and chips.
I'm up for that. Or London.
Or London. Yeah, exactly. But thank you. Thank you, Chris. And have a good rest of your day. And for everyone else, thank you very much for watching this episode of the Variety Show podcast. As always, please do visit our socials to find out more information about this, our past and future episodes. Thank you very much and goodbye.
It's variety.